Welcome to Color Country Politics, where we discuss all the important political issues facing Iron County, Utah. Our guests include elected officials and community leaders in or representing Iron County. This is episode 69. What's the plan, Stan?
Hey everybody, welcome back. I am so excited to see you again. I am Jennie Hendricks. I am here with my fabulous co-host, Jesse Harris. You are watching Color Country Politics, the episodes that are increasingly more random, but always relevant. Welcome back. Today, I am so excited because I'm sure you've heard Cedar City is in the middle of an update for the city's general plan. So, against all odds, we have got Mike and Ryan here because they are so busy and so overwhelmed, but they are just so knowledgeable. And Mike and Ryan are the guys who are kind of leading the city, leading the steering committee through this process of updating the general plan. So really quickly, Mike Hansen has worked in strategy, land use, organizational development for 20 plus years. He has worked on the governor's cabinet, and Mike's optimization efforts led Utah to being recognized as the best managed state. Ryan is a planning consultant originally from Parowan.
Another town.
Welcome home, Ryan. Passion for working with rural communities. He has worked with various government agencies, primarily in southern Utah, including multiple municipalities, as well as the Utah State Legislature. So your company is called Rural Community Consultants. Tell us just a little bit of a background about what you do, how you got here, and what experience you've got that's helping Cedar City with their general plan.
Yeah. Rural Community Consultants is a small planning shop. We like to say the word agile, so we don't say small so much because I'm kind of short. But it's an agile planning shop. We're a subsidiary of a larger engineering company, Jones & DeMille Engineering. They've done work all over the state for 30 some odd years. About 5 years ago, they had this idea that communities can build anything, but the trick is you got to build the right things first because everything's so expensive. Bridge versus fire station. Which one do you know? Which one? How to invest. And so they decided to kind of kickstart a small consulting shop. So since that time, we've done projects in almost every county in Utah. We're in Wyoming. Just kicking a little project off in Arizona. We've done 50, believe it or not, major local government planning and regulation writing kind of projects in the last 5 years. Our big focus, though, is small towns with a rural feel, hence the name, because we understand that, there's very urban issues, and you can find a bunch of planners that understand that, specialize in that. But when it comes to rural, there's a different approach and some different things you need to know. And so that's kind of where we specialize. It's funny with Cedar City specifically, when we first started, they wanted to keep the rural feel, and a lot of what the work we're doing is very urban. It feels. Cedar's kind of cool. It plays both sides of that.
It is a cool town. You are not wrong. And I think that that's one of the things that as a community, we're really sort of in the middle of processing because we are growing and we are growing rapidly. But it is so important for the members of this community really to hang on to that rural community feel, our history, what brought us here. So how do we balance, that rural heritage with the growth that we are experiencing and is showing no signs of slowing down? So take us through, if you could, just from like a 30,000 foot view. What is a general plan? Who cares if you have a general plan? Why do we need a general plan? What's that all about?
The general plan is a requirement of state statute. So that's the easy answer. You have to have one if you're a town. But the purpose of a general plan, it's like the foundation. I call it the bottom of the pyramid. It's supposed to articulate the vision of the community. And I like to say, and it's kind of tongue in cheek, but really the general plan needs to be written by the residents. if that makes sense. What do you like? What kind of neighborhoods do you want to live in? You know, that kind of stuff. So the community is supposed to be writing that. That's why we've done so much public outreach and projects like this. There's another part that most people get confused about, and that's zoning. And land use regulation and zoning and subdivision, all those rules, they get pretty technical. And so I know there's both public documents, but I like to look at that as these are the kind of the rules the city kind of writes. I mean, ultimately, I could say the public has plenty of input, but really, the ordinances and such are supposed to implement the vision.
So you've got a plan. You've got a general plan. So Cedar City has a general plan, and what you're saying is that general plan isn't zoning. The general plan is here's generally where we want commercial, or parks, or high density, or low density. So sort of laying out, to your point, the vision of what the local community sees for their near future, long-term future. How long is a general plan supposed to last?
Yeah, so that's usually we say the lifespan is about 10 years for a general plan. But you're always going to want to be reviewing it. Usually it's every year, every 2 years, you want to be reviewing it and looking at it and making sure it's current and what the community actually wants. But anything more than 10 years, we've seen some that 2002, 2001, you know, in that area, that's the last time they updated their general plan. And it's in a place like Cedar, especially, that's not Cedar. Cedar's is about 10 years, so they're right on track there. But anything more than that, your community's probably changed so much, it's not worth the paper it's printed on to keep using that general plan.
That's really interesting, because I know that has been sort of a bludgeon that has been used. Is, you know, Cedar City hasn't updated its plan since 2012. But you're saying that that's not really atypical. That maybe looking at pieces of it every year or two, or do you look at the whole thing? What do you see as the most effective for cities of our size with relative to the general plan and keeping it current?
Yeah, so how much you guys are growing, I mean, that should be reviewed quite often. And I mean, you don't do a whole new project every 2 years, because then that's just spending a lot of money and it's probably not doing a whole lot. But yeah, I would say every 2 years, you should probably at least look at a lot of it to make sure it's still a section at a time, chapter at a time is probably the easiest way to do it for capability wise. But it should be often, just to make sure you're still getting the voice of the community involved in it.
And I'll add that, you know, as a consultant, if a town says, hey, rural community consultant, will you come in and help us do outdoor recreation or housing, or, you know, like an issue? If they come in and say, we just want to tighten up this issue, that's actually very hard for our team, because in a city, if you're going to create a good plan, the left hand and the right hand have to talk to each other. You know, if you plan all these jobs and all this commercial and economic development, but you don't have housing that supports it or lines to connect those dots, it's very hard. You might create a problem by solving a problem, you know. And so we like to do comprehensive updates of community plans.
That is a very well-made point and a beautiful segue into, let's talk specifically about Cedar City's general plan update. And I like that you hit on some of those elements, because I know in some of those, in some of these steering committee meetings, we kind of keep adding things that we should, you know, kind of pack into this plan. We want to include everything and have a plan for everything. So kind of talk us through where we are with Cedar City's general plan. What are the elements that are being reviewed, and where do we go next with all of this information?
Well, that's a good one. In fact, if people want a visual to tie to that, go to cedarcityplan.org. And it's interesting to see, because Cedar City, it's got such an involved community. It's got such a growth potential and a drive, and you know, flywheel is spinning very fast in your neighborhood, so to speak. We have, I think it's 16 distinct chapters. We try to make it a more simple update, but there are 16 separate things. So really, if a community member is concerned about the downtown, there's a chapter just about downtown. And trails became such a big issue in Cedar City, it's a standalone. Now, normally when we do a general plan, trails is just part of parks and recreation and things like that. But it's so big, it has to kind of stand alone. So that's where we're at. There's a draft that is coming together of the actual plan. It's incorporated a lot of public input. The city mailed out, I can't remember how many thousands of flyers, and we've done surveys and open houses and like I said, steering committee meetings and such. It's starting to come and starting to gel together into a document. But what's critical about this document, and a general plan will never be finished, because you can never get everybody's wishes onto the same piece of paper, because left hand and right hand. I think what you're going to see is it's an update to what the city had previously, but so far, I don't think that there are earth-shattering, world-changing elements of this general plan. There's a lot of refinement that needed to be made, and there's a lot of things that have happened in historically that the last plan didn't even envision because it wasn't real. Short-term rentals, that wasn't even a thing 10 years ago, and just as an example, there were a lot of outdoor recreation grant programs, didn't even exist a decade ago. But they're there now, and we're talking about how the city can leverage those and where those investments might be able to make the most impact.
Yeah.
I think I pulled up cedarcityplan.org, and anybody watching or listening to this podcast, if you haven't been to cedarcityplan.org, it's just a fire hydrant of information that you can start to digest if you want to weigh in on this process. So community vision, local economy, land use, infrastructure, housing, parks and rec, transportation, annexation, and boundaries. That was a really fun conversation a couple weeks ago. Downtown, which is something everybody knows is near and dear to my heart. Historic preservation, which kind of goes hand in hand there. Education, which is a big deal in this area. The environment, emergency preparedness, fire safety in a drought, trails, and healthcare. That is a lot to try and pack into a general plan. How does that relate to other plans that you see out there? Are we trying to bite off more than we can chew, or is it better to kind of try and pack all of that in so we at least have a direction?
Well, and with a lot of that stuff, the city really doesn't, it has a control, it has a say, but there's a lot of stuff like education, healthcare type stuff that isn't necessarily under the city umbrella, but the city impacts that and has such a huge role in it. And where Cedar, you've got the hospital that feeds the region, you've got SUU right there, so I don't know if it's biting off more than you can chew. I just think Cedar's got a lot going on to be a rural community that would require those extra chapters and just a say in how the city can support those.
And the way we're trying to do it with this plan specifically, it's every plan, of course, but we're trying to integrate a lot of the goals and strategies. So, for example, if we want to, under the healthcare chapter, we want to have healthy neighborhoods, healthy people. Well, the city's not going to go out and check your pulse every day. But we can tie that to maybe your local trails chapter where we want to have safe walks to school and that kind of thing, and make it facilitate an active community. So it does sound like a lot, and it is a lot, but we are trying to synthesize it and simplify it and just put a cap on things. So you can never plan everything.
Yeah, well, and that's why we kind of do these updates regularly, because things do change. And I think as rapidly as Cedar City and Iron County generally, this whole entire area is growing, we are going to have to sort of stay on top of it and really assess what needs to be addressed as the community grows, population-wise and geographically, as we start to spread out. So,
absolutely right.
Go ahead.
Well, sorry. That just bring a really good thing to bear. We talked about that annexation discussion where we were talking about, well, how big should Cedar City ever be? And it's and some of it is kind of a dream. But the members in that meeting, they started to stretch the boundary of the city. Well, don't you think it should go this far? Well, we need more land. Interesting, because we got to probably dial it back in the plan and say, if you had that much land and if you built it all out, do you have the water that can do that? It's another issue on this side that you got to make sure there's these trade-offs. And
could you keep up on the roads? Could you keep up on, all that other stuff? And like I was saying, Cedar's kind of an interesting place because it's really the hub of that area.
Yeah.
I was just in Pearland this last weekend. I grew up there. The majority of things you go to Cedar to do. If I crashed my car, I couldn't go to, the Paraguna Hospital there or Enoch or, I'd have to go to Cedar in most cases to do that. So we talk about expanding, the land use, what are the ramifications of that, but also you're such a major player in the region that it's hard not to say, okay, we've got to keep those in, not just for the Cedar residents, but for those outside of Cedar as well that rely so heavily on the town.
Yeah, that's a well-made point. So we're talking about the Cedar City general plan, but a lot of what happens in Cedar City is really affected and has a great deal of interaction with the surrounding communities.
Absolutely.
East to the north, to the west. I mean, Cedar City really is a hub for that. And I did want to bring up another point, talking about people's dreams being crushed when we're talking about the annexation. The engineers, they come in and they crush everyone's dreams when they start talking about, well, where's your infrastructure? Well,
right.
Do we have to talk about infrastructure? We can't just go grab, all of the pieces that we want.
That's a true thing. Well, the other side of that coin that I like to remind the engineers we work with, and they love it, is you can buy all kinds of stuff if you have money.
That's right.
If there's really demand for whatever flung down in this parcel of ground, they will pay to get and eventually infrastructure goes there. That said, Cedar City is very interesting. We have a graphic in the plan that I want to promote this toward the end. It shows the average age of the structure. And it's kind of this heat map. And it's so interesting. You've got the downtown core part of Cedar. And these are some of your older historic houses. And then just as the city grows, it's like it gets newer and newer. If you look at that map, and then as a planning nerd or an engineering nerd, we look underneath that map and say, wait, well, let's talk about the pipes. That's the nickname for the infrastructure. Some of this stuff in the town core is aging. The newer stuff has new infrastructure. But some of these are paid with impact fees, whereas, the folks in the city core, what do they get to do and how do they get to deal with it? These are things normal people, I call them normal people, non-planners don't usually think about, sorry. They don't normally think that way, but that's what we're hoping that this plan can do two purposes. It's a plan, so the city knows, oh yeah, this is aging, we got to take care of it. But it's also got an education component, and we're not trying to write a book report on Cedar City. That's a big project. But we do want to add a little bit of context, at least, so that some of these goals that might come out of it make sense. You can kind of see where it comes from.
That is a very well-made point. And as someone who has had to replace water and sewer lines in buildings in the middle of Cedar City, I can tell you that the old clay pipes do not last forever. No, they don't.
We've heard it.
They do not. Well, Mike and Ryan, tell us, where are we right now in Cedar City's plan? What are the next steps coming at us? Do we have a projected end date? What's the end goal here?
As far as a projected end date, there's certain dominoes that have to follow because, like I said, it's a community written plan. So ultimately, if you were to start where the dominoes stop, I guess, the city council is the elected body that they're going to say, this is our official plan at some point. Before that domino can hit, the one before that is the planning commission. And the planning commission has to make a recommendation. They have to have time to review it. And then they say, we as a planning commission, we've studied out the city with these folks. And, here, dear city council, we think you should approve it. So that's your second domino that has to go. We think that before it goes to the planning commission, because those are public hearings and folks don't typically like to go to we want to hold one more public event of some kind, an open house, a mapping workshop, or whatever we have to do. Let folks come in after they've had a chance to read a draft and say, my gosh, you guys totally hit it on the head, because I'm sure they're going to drive out to say it. Or they might say, you missed this really critical spot. Let's talk more about this one. We want to have that open house. Now, as far as dates, that draft is within probably this week, next week, that it's ready to go to our steering committee. Now, steering committee, for those who don't know, is shock troops, I guess. Some community members. We have 15, 16 folks on there.
Quite a bit.
Some city folks on there. Some normal people. Sorry. They're on. They need a chance to review it before we say it's ready to go for the public. But I don't think it's much. Well, I don't know, but I don't think that it's got much more that needs to change in it. The plan is, like I say, coming together. Some of the goals, we need some help refining those with city staff. We don't know exactly what grants they've gone for or whatever. We don't know some of those details. Got to give them some time. But I would think that most public meetings don't happen very well in July, but by August, I would hope.
Did we freeze up?
Planning, reading that. Sorry?
Okay. You guys froze up on my screen, but it must have been me.
Oh, sorry.
Shoot.
So I don't know if you heard
No,
that.
that's
but
it.
basically, we were hoping that it could go to the Planning Commission in August, and only because July is a hard time to get the public out, for planning meetings.
Nobody wants to go inside in buildings in the middle of the summer. They'd rather be outside.
True.
So that's,
And if we
Enjoying
put fireworks on the
trails.
plan, bad.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. And I do want to just kind of emphasize that we've been working on this thing for months, and there's been a ton of public input. Flyers have gone out, postcards have gone out. I think there was information sent out in the water bill. There was websites that people could weigh in on and take surveys. So this has been a really heavy lift, getting a lot of public input. So, and that's something that I think you guys and the city and the steering committee need to be commended for, is really reaching out and getting that much community input. It's just that much more to kind of digest and sift through. And that's a big, big job. So if we're looking at kind of getting this through the process, maybe having another mapping open house, maybe another general open house to the Planning Commission by August, where I'll do my darndest to move it through and get. And part of the reason I feel so strongly about this is we are being asked in Planning Commission and at City Council to approve general plan changes right now, to approve things that could change the nature of the general plan and the zoning in this community pretty drastically. And so that's one of the things that I'm personally feeling sort of a sense of urgency about. But Ryan, to your point, you're right. You're not going to, if you want community input, you have to ask for it when the community is going to respond and be available.
Well, I don't know who wouldn't want to take a survey on their boat out at Lake Powell. I don't know why. People don't, but
there's no service out there anyway, so.
That's true. There's no water anywhere either. So.
That's true. Yeah, there's no water anyway. People just stay in town and they can go on our trails.
Yeah.
So Mike and Ryan, before we wrap up, what else do we need to know about the process, about our local plan? What's important to you guys that our community is aware of? And then what should our community do, to kind of be aware of what this process is about?
Well, I think the big thing that we've kind of heard and that we've discussed going through this plan is this isn't going to be an end-all be-all plan that just every issue, every problem Cedar's ever had is solved in this magical plan that we have. We think a lot of it will be solved, and the main part of this plan, the thing that we focused on, is that if it's a community-driven, public has as many chances they can to have what they say, you're not going to have these meetings so often where you're changing the general plan and you're changing zoning and because it's like, well, we just spent all this time and effort really understanding what's going to benefit the community. We've listened to the citizens. We don't need to change the plan so often because we just put all this effort making it to where we think Cedar's gonna benefit the most. So that's the big thing that I would say. And then just as many chances you can to have your voice heard. Come and take our surveys. Come to the public hearings. We've been doing this for over 6 months now, probably. So if you haven't heard about it, then you're probably under a rock somewhere or something. I don't. But like it's not going to be an end all be all, but come have your voice heard and play a part in making Cedar a little better.
That's great. And again, if people want to see what is happening and get updated on where we are in the process, it's cedarcityplan.org. And you can just take as long as you want on that site. And there's a ton of information there. So Anything else we need to know, guys?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to get the word out again. That's what we were really trying to do is, let the public come and tell us. It's their community.
Yeah.
So we need them to own it and tell us where it's going to go. Everybody's property rights are, sacred things, but we want to make sure we do the best good for the most people. So not a perfect plan, but hopefully puts you in a better position.
I think it's definitely going to. I'm pretty tickled with the progress that we've made in the conversations that have been happening. It's pretty cool. So Mike Hansen and Ryan Robinson from Rural Community Consultants, thank you so much for your time. I know you guys are slammed, and it's been just a treat to have you kind of take us through what this community needs to know about Cedar City's general plan. Thanks again.
Thank you.
This has been the latest episode of Color Country Politics. I'm Jennie Hendricks with my silent partner, Jessie Harris. And we will see you soon. See.
You've been listening to Color Country Politics, a production in cooperation with Utah Politico Hub and graciously sponsored by Century 21 Prestige Realty at 121 North Main Street, Cedar City. Special thanks to Amoeba Crew for use of their song Background Indie Rock, licensed under Creative Commons. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever fine podcasts are found. Also, check out our YouTube channel where we post video of our interviews. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and our website at www.colorcountrypolitics.com.